Hello and welcome. My name is Austin and welcome to part 2 of my Intro to Programming series with C#. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create some string variables and how to do some string manipulation using the various common methods in the string class. So why don't we go ahead and get started. So we're back here on the desktop with the basic Hello World console app that we created in part 1. And the link to that video will be down below in the description if you haven't seen it yet. First thing we're going to do is talk about commenting before we get started. So comments in code are basically lines that are ignored by the compiler. These lines could be used to explain and clarify stuff for you as the developer and other developers as part of the documentation process. There are two ways to write a comment in C#. The first way is a single line comment. You have two forward slashes on the front of the line, and then you can write your comment here. And this is only for one line. For a multi-line comment, you would use a forward slash, an asterisk, and to close it, you would use an asterisk and a closing forward slash. And within here, you can add a comment, another line, and so on. I'm going to now add in some extra comments for the various methods I'm going to show you today, and then I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back and I added those comments for the various things I'll be showing you in this video. I'm also going to comment out the last console.write line, hello world, so that we can have a clean console output so we can see what's going on with the methods we'll be using. From the top, we're going to create our string variables. And in this example, I'll be first using two variables. So we'll create it by typing string hello equals hello. And then we'll create the second variable called world and set it equal to world. Notice the capital H and W. This will be important for some of the methods I'll be showing you below. First, let's talk about the variable declaration line. So this is how declaring a variable looks in C#. The first part of this is the type of the variable. The second part is the name, which by the way, you'll notice a lowercase h. So in this case, we're not following Pascal case coding naming convention. We're actually following camel case. And this is a recommendation from Microsoft C# standards where any locally scoped variables, that is anything within a method, should be camel cased. Camel casing is where if you have more than one word in a name like this, the first letter is lowercase, but every other word that is part of the name should be capitalized for the first letter. Let's set it back to hello. After the name, we have the assignment operator, which is an equals sign, and then we have what we're assigning it to, which is a new string object we're creating called hello. One cool thing you can do with C# is use var on the left for the type. We know on the right side that we have a string object, so we don't need to type string on the left. We can just type var to have it infer it for us. This is because the compiler knows that the right side is a string. Moving forth, we should use var for declaring any variables we create, unless we are explicitly trying to cast one type on the right of the assignment to the type that is the variable, or if we are assigning a variable to null. Now that we have our string variables, let's talk about the equality operator. The equality operator could be used to see if two strings are equal to each other, and that is used in if conditionals quite often. Let's create an if conditional and then say if hello is equal to world. The equality operator uses two equal signs. We will write console.writeLine saying hello is equal to world. Let's run the app and see what happens. We see that nothing is output to the console on top, meaning that if hello equals world returns false. This is because they are not equal to each other. So let me change world to hello. We can see that it is now outputted to the console and it does say hello is equal to world. Now let's say that hello has a lowercase h in the second variable, but an uppercase H in the first variable. Will this return true? Let's see what happens. It doesn't output anything, meaning it returns false. So if we want to do a case-insensitive comparison, we need to use the equals method. So let's comment this line of code out so that we can have a clean console output, and then move on to the equals method. So we can say if hello.equals and put world as the first argument. We can then say for the second argument the comparison type. By typing string comparison, we can choose the various fields that will allow us to ignore the case. So let's go with string comparison.ordinal ignore case. This is all documented on Microsoft C# website under the string comparison enum page. I'll have a link to this in the description down below, and it shows you the various options you can use and what they do. Let's copy this console write line here and make it say case insensitive. Keep in mind that we do have an uppercase H in the first one and a lowercase h in the second variable. Let's see what happens. We see that it does output to the console, which means that our comparison here using the equals method is ignoring the case, meaning this comparison is case insensitive. So that's how you would do that. Moving on, let's comment this out and move to the length property. So let's do a console write line here. This one's much simpler. We can say hello.length, and length isn't a method, so it doesn't require parentheses. It is actually a property of the string. It should return 5 because hello has 5 characters. Let's see what happens. Yes, it does return 5 up here. So that's a very simple way to get the number of characters, aka the length of a string, in C#. Before we start with the IndexOf method, it's important to know that strings are basically an array of characters, and each character has a specific index starting at 0. So using the IndexOf method will return the index of a specific character or substring within a string. So let's see what happens. Let's do another console write line and then put hello.indexOf. And let's say we want the index of E in the word hello, which should be at index of 1 because H is starting at the index of 0. Let's see if we get 1 in the console. We get 1 right here, so it works just as we expected. Moving on, let's try doing the last index of, which is basically the same of index of, but it finds the last occurrence of whatever you're trying to search for in that string and gets the index of that. So let's do another console write line, put hello last index of, and let's do L this time because we have 2 L's in the word hello. We should get a 3. Yep, we get 3 here. Now, knowing what indexes are when it comes to strings, what if you wanted to retrieve a character at a specific index of a string? You would have to use the array subscript syntax to access that character. Let's do another console write line, and then say we want the character at the index of 4. That should return O, and let's see what happens. And it does return O. Let's move on to the compare method. Basically, it's used to compare 2 strings. That will call string A and string B. So let's do a console write line, and then call the string compare method. Notice that we are calling the compare method from the string class directly. This is because the compare method is a static method that is not accessible from a string object. So it takes in 2 arguments. First one would be representative of string A, and the second one would be string B. In our case, we'll put hello for string A and then world for string B. Let's run the code and see what happens. You can see that it returns -1. And what that means is that when you are comparing 2 strings, what it does is that it sorts the strings in order ascendingly. And anything less than 0 means that string A precedes string B in the sort order. If string compare returns 0, what that means is that hello is at the same position in the sort order as string B, meaning they are the same. And if string compare is greater than 0, it means that hello follows world in the sort order. Moving on, let's talk about concatenation using the addition operator. This is where we are combining more than one string together. Let's do another console write line and then use the addition operator to add world to the hello variable. We can see that it is concatenated now and it says hello world. Let's say we wanted to add a space in here. We would add another addition operator and add another string that has a space in it in between them. Let's see what happens. We can see that it does show hello space world. Cool, so that's how you concatenate 2 strings together using the addition operator. Now let's look at another method of concatenation using the concat method. So let's do a console.write line and call concat method directly from the string class. Put hello, comma, space, and then the world variable here. This is basically the same as the way we did it with the addition operator here, but the concat method might be cleaner in some scenarios. And then you could add more commas as much as you want to concatenate many variables together. Now let's see what happens. So we do get hello world as we expected with a space in between them. Moving on, let's look at the format method. We'll write another console line and then do a string.format. And then in the first part, we can say that this is my formatted string. and then in curly braces, we'll put 0, a space, and then 1. Any commas that come after this first main string will be injected in these places where you put curly braces 0 or 1 and so on. In the place of 0, we want the hello variable, and in the place of 1, we'll want the world variable to show up. We can see that it now says this is my formatted string, hello world. So that's another way you can concatenate strings together and also do it in a very formatted way. Now let's talk about string interpolation. This is a more recent way that people are using that allows you to interpolate variables into strings. So basically it can also be used to concatenate strings together in a more cleaner way if you have a lot of variables to concatenate together. So let's see what that looks like. So we'll do a console.writeLine and then add a $sign with a string in quotes next to it. And within here, we can say this is an interpolated string saying, and then we'll add curly braces and then output the hello variable here, add a space, add another set of curly braces that outputs the word world here. Let's see what happens. We can see that it says this is an interpolated string saying hello world, which is exactly what we wrote here. String interpolation is becoming a more common way to inject variables into string outputs, because it's a lot cleaner. Now let's talk about the contains method. This is basically, as it says, we can check if a string contains another string. So for this one, let's do an if conditional. Say that we want to see if the word world contains OR in it. And then we'll add a console write line saying it contains OR. Let's see what happens. It does output it contains OR, which means that the word world that we have for the variable contains the letters OR. And of course, this is case sensitive as well by default. You can also add a comma, and then for the second argument, do a string comparison, ordinal ignore case, to check in a case insensitive way. Now let's comment this out and then move on to the StartsWith method. So let's do another if, do a world starts with, we can do WO, and then console write line. It starts with WO with a capital W. There it is. Let's comment this out. And moving on, we also have the EndsWith method, which is basically the same as the StartsWith method, but it checks at the end of a string. Next, we have the IsNullOrEmpty method. So let's put it in an if conditional because it returns a Boolean, and then check from the string class directly if the hello variable is null or empty. But we know it's not null or empty, so let's put a not operator in front of it using the exclamation point to do the inverse of checking if it's null or empty. We'll do a console write line, hello is not null or empty. And there we have it. Moving on, we also have a method called IsNullOrWhiteSpace. The S should actually be capitalized. And this basically checks if a string is equal to null or has been set to null, or it just contains white spaces and no other characters. So let's create a new variable for this actually so we can see what's going on. And then we'll set it just to a bunch of spaces. And then we'll do an if conditional and do a string.isNullOrWhiteSpace. And then say we want to check our string with white spaces, and then do a console write line and say yes, it does have white spaces. And there you go. Next, we have the split method, which splits a string into an array of other strings or characters that is separated by a delimiter that you specify. So let's create a new string actually and call it list of fruits. So in this example, we'll do apples, comma, bananas, comma, pears. So now that we have our list of fruits separated by commas in one string, we're going to split it into a string array. So let's do an array of fruits and then do list of fruits dot split and then our delimiter or separator that we want to separate by. This will return an array of fruits containing apples at index 0, bananas at index 1, and pears at index 2. So we can't console write line this because it will show a system.string array. It won't actually show the contents of the array. So one thing we can do is run the debugger with a breakpoint on a line after this to show us the contents of that array, or we can use a for loop to output it to the console. Let's do that really quick. So let's do for each var fruit in an array of fruits, and then we'll do a console write line fruit. It's iterating through each element of an array of fruits and then assigning it to the variable fruit for each element, and then we are writing that to the console. So let's see what happens. We get apples, bananas, and pears on new lines. So the split is working. So let's comment out the for each here because we're going to move to the join method from the string class that will join these things together into one string. The inverse of splitting, basically. We're going to create a new variable. Let's call it fruits joined from the array, and then call the join method from the string class directly because it's only available there. And then we'll say the separator we want. So instead of commas, to show you that it's different, let's do hyphens and then put in an array of fruits here. And then we'll add a new line here to write it to the console, fruits joined from the array. And let's see if we get what we needed. Apples hyphen bananas hyphen pears. That's the join method. Moving on to the remove method, this basically removes all characters starting from a certain index to the end of the string or to a specified count. Let's do a console.writeLine and call hello and type remove and then put a 0 in here. This should not output anything because it's removing everything within the string. We get an empty string here. Now let's say we put 1. We should only be outputting H because we are removing everything starting from the index of 1. There you go. Now let's say we want to remove everything starting from the index of 1 and only up to a count of 2. Let's see what we get. We get HLO. And that's how you use the remove method. As for the replace method, we can use it to replace one or multiple occurrences of a character or substring within the string. So let's do a console.writeLine and then say we want to replace something from hello. We'd type hello.replace, and let's say I want to replace the two L's with 1, 2, 3. We'll put the characters we want to replace in the first argument, and then the characters we'll replace it with in the second argument. Let's see if it works. There we go, we get HE1230. Next we have the substring method, which is used to get part of a string starting at a specific index. So let's do another console.writeLine and then do hello.substring, and within here there are two overloaded methods. So one is just the substring with the start index, and the second is start index to a specific length. Let's do the first one first and put 2. This should get everything from the index of 2 inclusively to the end of the string. This means we should get LLO returned to the console. There it is. Now let's say we want to start from the index of 2, but only retrieve that and one character next to it. We put the length of 2 as the second argument, when we should get LL. There it is, we get LL. Next we have a ToLower method. I'll create two new variables here. Uppercase, we'll make it say hello in all caps. And then we'll do a console.writeLine and say uppercase ToLower. And this should return an all lowercase version of the word hello. Nice. And the same thing could be done with the ToUpper method, which is where it converts everything to uppercase. Next, we have the trim method, which removes all trailing white spaces from a start of a string and the end of a string. So let's say we had a string with trailing white spaces. We'll add spaces to the start, something here, and spaces to the end. First, let's write this to the console to see if those white spaces show up. We can see that the spaces are here. Now let's say we call the trim method on this. We can see that the trailing white spaces are gone. The same thing could be said for the TrimStart, which only trims the trailing white spaces from the start of a string, and the TrimEnd method, which only removes the trailing white spaces from the end of a string. Now let's talk about how we can read in a line of user input from the console to a string variable. First, we would create a new variable and let's call it user input, and then we'll say console.readLine. When the console app gets to this method being called, it's going to pause the console and wait for the user to input something. And then when they press the enter key, that line that they entered will be set as a string to the user input variable. And then after that, let's put console.writeLine user input. And before that, let's say that you typed this and run the app. So in here, it's just blinking because it's waiting for user input. So we would type something here, and then there it is. Something here here was set to the variable user input, and then it was outputted to the console here. So in this video, I showed you how to do some string manipulation using various common string class methods. Now there are a lot more methods in the string class that you can use, and I'll put a link to Microsoft's documentation showing you those methods down below. If you like what you saw, please hit the subscribe button and leave a comment if you have any questions, and thank you for watching.